Hello and welcome. I'm Rambo Talabong and you're watching Rappler Talk. For today, we will be speaking with forensic pathologist Raquel Fortun on the case of Christine Angelica Dacera, the flight attendant who was found dead in a Makati City hotel on New Year's Day. It's a case that's already taken over the news, taken over the country, the internet. A lot of speculation in there. But today, we will be speaking with Fortun to talk about what science has to say, to talk about it in a more sober way so that we can have conversations that are more guiding and that we don't decide based on our emotions. Raquel Fortun, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, good afternoon.
Okay, ma'am, let's go straight to the point. One of the biggest issues right now on the case of the Dacera case is speculations and insinuations about the case being a rape case. What can you say about that, given the current state of investigation of the police?
Well, for one thing, I am not involved. I am just dependent on whatever comes to me, usually by way of social media, in the
Mhm.
news, etc. So I don't know what's going on really. But if you just base it on the so-called medical legal report, there's nothing
Mhm.
here. There's nothing here that says there was trauma of the physical kind and also sexual assault.
Doc Fortune, usually ba sa mga gantong cases, in these cases, kung may medical legal report, sinasabi ba explicitly that there is rape, there is sexual assault? What are the telling signs and what are the things that are in fine print that we are looking out for in order to actually have a credible medical legal report saying that there is probability or there are indications that there is rape?
Well, for one thing, we don't use the word rape because that has a legal meaning. So
Mhm.
we're going to describe the injuries.
Mhm.
Particularly, where are they located? Genital area. Usually, that would be common. Also, breasts and so on. But there are different ways of uh, sustaining injuries from sexual assault. So it's really, uh, you're practically looking at physical injuries as well. But for you to decide, is this a sexual nature?
Mhm.
Uh, it really boils down to totality of evidence. Okay?
Mhm.
Like, for instance, was there evidence of, let's say, vaginal penetration?
Mhm.
And what object could have been used? If there was penile penetration of the vagina, you just might see seminal emission.
Mhm.
And then, are you able to detect male cells?
Mhm.
And if you are, what kind of tests can be done? Like, there are tests for semen, like you detect prostate secretions.
Mhm.
Because for sure, you're not supposed to see this in in a female body. Okay, so it belongs to someone else, a male. But more specifically, uh, we now have DNA analysis. So
Mhm.
you cannot, you don't just identify this as male DNA. You are even able to identify whose DNA it is. So there are different ways. And in a first world setting, and you come up with a death investigation of something like this, which is unnatural, there could have been violence, previously healthy, and so on. There could have been intoxication.
Yes.
You check everything. You
Mhm.
check everything. It's not just the body. You do CSI. Um, you, you, you ask the people around what do they know of the case. In
Mhm.
other words, a frank, outright, objective, scientific investigation is done.
Mhm. Dr. Fortune, from what I understanding from our conversation right now, we should not just focus everything on the medical legal report, even if it's important, because we have to look at the whole case. holistically? Because right now the discussion has been around just the medical or the report, just on the autopsy. What would you say to that?
It's what we call totality of evidence that will make you decide what could have happened, right?
Mhm.
But really, the healthy attitude in any investigation is you first start with a clean slate, no conclusions, for sure. And then you look at the physical evidence, see where it leads you. And that's when you come up with hypotheses, theories, and so on. It's not like you come up with a conclusion and then you try and fit the evidence that you get or the findings uh, to support that conclusion. That's not how it's done. And definitely, you do not just speculate. Yung something like, oh, this is what I saw on the CCTV, and then the people must have been doing this and that. That's subject to interpretation. You look at the physical evidence because it's definitely more objective.
Dr. Fortun, what the police are saying, I think parang na pumapasok to sa sinabi mo lang ngayon. They say that, oh, we spotted some contusions and lacerations on her legs, there are bruises, and then they're saying, this must have been rape. This is rape because there are injuries on parts of her body, and she is the only female in a party of a group of males. What can you say about that conclusion from the police, from what they have right now? Would you make the same conclusions with the same pieces of evidence that they have?
So this is where your quote-unquote medical legal report comes in. So you examine the body and what did you see? And based on the report that I have, described also where some small contusions, abrasions, just a few. And then where are they located? Actually, as described, they're just on the lower extremities, front part. Okay, so what do they mean? They're not really specific enough for you to conclude, oh, this is consistent with sexual assault. Okay? Because again, totality of evidence, you look at the case objectively, how was she found? What happened after? Is it possible that these injuries were sustained before the, her being found unresponsive and so on? So keep an open mind about it. And another possibility is, I think she was carried at some point.
Yes.
They seem to be located just on the front part of the thighs and the lower legs. And so again, is it possible that these injuries were sustained when there was an attempt to move her now? In fact, they were trying to get help for her. So keep an open mind. But definitely, just from the injuries alone, one cannot make a conclusion that this is one way or the other if you are thinking sexual assault.
Flipping that argument naman, another part of the discussion is saying that they are already dismissing this case as not rape. If it's too early to say that it is rape, is it also too early to dismiss it based on the same pieces of evidence and information that we have?
I think it's too early to dismiss the case. I have heard of statements saying the case is solved.
Mhm.
And that's premature because you have not really completed your investigation. How do you know something is solved? What is your definition of case solved? And that's the problem in the Philippines. They say it's enough that you have identified suspects. But in this case, you're not even sure what is something as basic as the cause of death, what is the manner of death. Uh, I don't know if they even have toxicologic test results pending still.
Mhm.
Is this final? You have not really sat down to correlate everything, to try and reconstruct what happened. You don't have the statements yet. So why are you saying this is case solved? And in a first world country, actually, their definition of case solved is you went through the rigors of a court trial. And in the end, And in the end, you were able to get a conviction or acquittal. That's it. Then that means you have solved a case.
Just something that we're far from at this point. Dr. Fortun, how about inverting the police's assumptions right now? The other assumption and the other thing, another conclusion that's being floated on social media is that it is not rape based on the information, based on the circulating autopsy report as well. Is it also too early to say that it is not rape?
Just based on what I know, which would be very limited.
Yes.
Based on this document, which is the so-called medical legal report, there is nothing here that indicates, that supports sexual assault.
Based on the medical legal report. Okay. Dr. Fortun, what could have the police done to make the investigation more rich so that we can make more inferring and more intelligent opinion on how this case went about?
What should have been done is a basic death investigation for an unfortunate incident like this, where you have a previously well individual who's just suddenly found unresponsive and then who eventually dies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is a case of an unnatural, apparently an unnatural death. And what makes it unnatural is the fact that, I think it is a fact that previous to her death, she had been drinking. Okay. If she was found dead in bed, then you just might think this could have been a natural phenomenon. Okay, but anyway, so it's really suspicious. Yes, you look for signs of violence. And the standard approach would have been a typical CSI, forensic autopsy. You check your statements. You do ancillary procedures such as, if you're thinking sexual assault, then it's a more meticulous gathering of evidence, what you call a sexual assault forensic exam. You get your rape kit. It's a kit that guides you step by step, what samples to take, the swabs, the hair, etc. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
But very importantly, you should have done this at the right time, which is the soonest possible time. In this case, she was taken. She was taken to a hospital. Okay, that's defensible. They found her unresponsive. They tried to bring her to a hospital. In the hospital, what was seen? I have not seen the hospital records. She was taken to the ER. There should be medical records. Anything that the doctors noted and actually did or did not do should be there, right? And then after that, so she was declared dead. She was pronounced dead. What happened to the body? People in the Philippines forget that the body is evidence. So apparently from Makati, that body ended up in some morgue in Pasay, right? How was the body handled? So the incident was January 1 based on this document. The autopsy was done morning of January 2. And apparently, in the interim, the body had already been embalmed.
Mm-hmm.
So the body was embalmed prior to the autopsy because it says in the report that they found the body already with an incision in the neck, embalmed, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
You lose
that means
a lot
nalinis na siya. Nalinis na siya, Doc Fortun.
Yun, ang tanong ko pa dito is, very basic, kasama sa investigation, what was she wearing? What was on her? The clothes on her should be part of an autopsy report. So that means you don't just remove them, you do not wash the body, you actually wrap them. In a first world setting, I have never seen this done in the Philippines, you put the hands in paper bags. And then you get the samples in the morgue, right? So that was not done. But worst of all, the body was embalmed. What's so bad about that? You already introduced chemicals into the circulatory system, the blood vessels. So there goes your toxicology, which is very critical in this case. Because apparently she was very young, healthy, no disease, 23 years old. And the autopsy seems to be non-specific. I really am not convinced about that aneurysm, the way it's described. And in the setting of a 23-year-old female, that is not uh, common.
Dr. Fortun, could you expound on that?
Yeah, I'd like to know what your basis really for saying that there was a ruptured thoracic aorta, aneurysm in the descending thoracic aorta. That's not typical for a young individual because it usually happens if you have someone with a diseased blood vessel. Okay? So it develops over time. It's not overnight. It cannot be related to intoxication and then suddenly it just ruptures. So what are you talking about? So that's not medically sound. And the way it is described in the report, I'm sorry, I don't buy this because it just says there's a transverse tear or punit with sharp and jagged edges. So what made you say that was an aneurysm and that it ruptured? And worst of all, if you have a ruptured aneurysm of the aorta is a high pressure, big vessel, artery. Okay? Very strong walls yan normally. However, if it ruptured, what kills you? It's the hemorrhage. The blood goes out. So you're going to see a lot of hemorrhage there inside the chest. I don't see that in the report. So what are you talking about? And really, forensic reports, that's the reason why you document a lot. Because you expect to be questioned. But in the Philippines, it seems that it's enough. Basta sinabi ko, maniwala kayo. Hindi ganun yun. You expect to be questioned. And actually, in the medical field, this is why we have conferences. This is why we're trained and how we're trained. You defend your findings.
Dr. Fortun, you've been talking about how much the Philippine justice system and the forensic investigation of the police is really lacking for many cases now. We've spoken a lot on many cases. I wanted to ask you now about a recent development from yesterday. The family wants a second autopsy from this case. And from our interview right now, you really are emphasizing on making and examining the body as early as possible, and that there are so many things that have already happened to the body that it's hard to discern what actually happened. Is a second autopsy something that can actually yield something that's of value to the case at this point?
Well, my attitude is, for most cases, that show me the body. Because if at least I see the body, I have something to base my findings on. I can evaluate the previous examination and so on. And I've done this for many types of cases like shooting, stabbing, and so on. Even decomposed. Even a decomposed body, show me. Because I want to know. However, really, I keep saying this, fresh is best. The best time to do an autopsy is the soonest possible time. So we're looking at a 5-day delay, post-mortem interval. You're looking at a body that's already previously embalmed and previously, quote-unquote, autopsy. And again, in the Philippines, that can mean a lot of things because I know I have seen cases which were autopsied, but then when I look, there is no examination done. Okay? What they practically did was just an external exam. I've seen cases where I see the usual incisions on the chest and abdomen. So I think, oh, they did an internal exam. And then lo and behold, the organs are still there. And that is still worth looking into. What kind of examination was done? So and so you have postmortem delay, post-autopsy, post-embalming. The most unfortunate limitation we have is we cannot do toxicology anymore
Yeah.
on a case like this. If you're thinking sexual assault, so sexual contact, is there male DNA still on the body? Can we still do swabbing? I doubt it. So this is where, that's it. Fresh is best, the soonest possible time. That should have been done.
So what could be done at this point, Dr. Fortun, given so much limiting factors in this case?
Well, as far as that so-called aneurysm is concerned, that would have been very obvious. If we open the body and check, was there really an aneurysm? Chances are we're still going to be able to check that.
Mhm.
Because as I said, if there's an aneurysm, there should have been hematoma or hemorrhage there. If the aorta is intact, so what are you talking about? If there was a transverse tear, what could have caused it? Maybe it was so many things. It was just iatrogenic, meaning in the process of doing your evisceration, removal of the organs. Maybe it's not significant. Then we're going to document everything, even the negative findings as well. I would still push for a second examination, especially if you've got this 2-page medical legal report only to
Now,
support.
Fortun, something that's pretty technical. Is it still possible to trace seminal fluid? Anything that would point to rape inside the genitalia of the body if it's already been embalmed and if it's already been autopsied once? Do you think there's much to still be learned about the body at this point?
Well, swabbing for, uh, sampling for anything, it's too late. It's too late because by this time the body had been washed, cleaned, and it's been 5 days. So if there's male DNA in the cells there, then they're probably gone. Toxicology, I would still attempt. Uh, the blood may not be uh, helpful anymore because of embalming. In the report, it is said that no urine was found in the bladder. Uh, but I know of other cases where they swab the bladder. But again, it depends on if that bladder had been washed and opened, etc. Then that's not helpful anymore. But there's something I would try, and this is vitreous fluid, the eye fluid, because it seems to be kind of more remotely affected by embalming. I have tried it in some cases, so maybe I would attempt that. But the next question is, where will I send the sample? Do we have toxicology laboratories capable of examining vitreous fluid?
Yeah.
Analytical chem? Kind of toxicologic examination? Is that possible in the Philippines? What we can do is to send the samples abroad. Embarrassing as it is that we're so backward in the Philippines. I have done that before, and it can be done.
So bottom line, it's pretty hard to save the body as it is at this point, Dr. Fortun. I'm going to ask you a two-faced question before I let you go, Dr. Fortun, if it's all right. Something that's really striking for this issue is how much the police is also controlling the information, releasing information, how they have prematurely released information that's not verified, and how they have made a lot of assumptions, many of them not really standing on any evidence. And on the other hand, there's also this intense public backlash, outrage. For the police, how should they have had handled the information release for this case? And for the public, what would be your advice? in listening to the police, in understanding this case better so that the outrage may be more informed. And kasi isa yung problem ngayon, iniisip ng mga tayo, sayang lang ba yung ating galit because there are doubts about the rape case, the case being raped. What would we advise? What's your advice on both sides?
Well, actually, information management is part and parcel of any investigation. And there is a professional way to do it if you have professionally trained investigators. Like you do your investigation, the usual CSI, autopsy, toxicology, etc., etc. And so you do your thing, but at the same time, you have to decide what the public has to know. Okay? And you have to be also concerned, regarding the family, the ones left behind. You have to be sensitive also to them. They're grieving, right? They lost somebody. Um, so control of information. And there is a professional way to do it. Like for instance, only one person is designated to speak. Okay? One does not speculate freely. Talk about intuition, feelings, and so on. Make sure that what you are releasing is based on something factual and well chosen. Okay, there is a reason for giving out a certain detail. Okay, you don't just blurt out whatever comes to your mind. In this particular case, something questionable is you've got medical findings being released by the non-doctor. Okay, and in this day and age of social media access and so on, this gives a lot of people the opportunity to be able to comment on anything and everything, and that includes me. So I hear what you're saying, and it's crazy, and I'm able to comment. And that's me, but and it also applies to anybody. We are freely able to communicate what we think. So individually, people should also be careful what they say. Just like the investigators, you cannot just automatically blurt out what you think, especially if you are a lay person and you don't really know what you're talking about. And again, same thing, you have to be sensitive to individuals who are really affected by this one, and this case, and that would be the families. Uh, Families, the actual people apparently accused, and you're not even sure if there is a solid basis for the accusation. And remember, in the Philippines and elsewhere, if you make an accusation, you'd better be able to back it up. And that's the basis of our adversarial system of justice. It's the prosecution that alleges, and it's the prosecution that actually supports whatever accusation they make. So everybody has a responsibility to be more responsible in a lot of ways.
Forensic pathologist Dr. Raquel Fortun, thank you so much for joining our program. Thank you so much for a lot of insight you provided to us. Everyone, that has been Dr. Raquel Fortun. I'm Rambo Talabong. Thank you for watching Rappler Talk.